This book actually has been, it's embarrassing to say, 20 years in the making. We started in 1997. So along with Infinite Intelligence and other manuscripts that suddenly surfaced in that year. I'll be talking after lunch about some of that topic and the history of it. But to remind you all, and for those who weren't here yesterday, a little bit about the Tiffin Lectures. We're taught there. Tiffin means lunch. Yeah, lunch lectures. Some people may associate the word tiffin with those metal canisters that we used to get given back in the 70s when we went to Mehrabad or Mehrabad. But actually the canister acquired its name from the lunch inside it. So it's lunch lectures. And presumably this title was on the cover of the principal manuscript, which I showed you some slides of, and we'll again this afternoon be showing. Thursday Tiffin Lectures is the title embossed on the cover of the principal manuscript. And Thursday is Guruvar. That's the name for Thursday in Marathi, Gujarati, and so forth, the Indic languages. Guru's Day. So traditionally one pays homage to one's guru or might visit one's guru on Thursdays. And at this time at Mehrabad, lots of people were coming to see Baba. He had become quite a well-known master in that part of Maharashtra. People would come from Maharaj and Narayan Maharaj, and Sai Baba had passed away already, but his reputation was growing. So Baba was a bit on the pilgrim circuit, and he would give darshan to pilgrims and sometimes would give talks. And then in the afternoons, typically, with the mandali, he would go to the family quarters, which is located on the edge of Erangan village. And if you go to Mehrabad, there's a dispensary. It's not the hospital building in the backside of Mehrabad. It's not that. It's a dispensary. Some of you know where it is, right? You've been there? It's a quarter mile or less from Mehrabad on the right-hand side if you're going to it. It's right on you're into the village already. That's basically on the site of where the family quarters was located all those years. And Kaka Shahane, one of Baba's disciples, was there, lived there, and presumably would entertain Baba and the mandali with lunch and snacks. And those were the days where the diet, the menu alternated between dal and rice and dal. Those are the two variations in the diet, plus vegetables. They'd have that. So, I mean, I'm sure for the mandali, it was a time of, austerity and hard physical work. So I'm sure that they enjoyed the occasion, and Baba would hold forth on talks. So that's what that's the period these come from, 1926 to 1927. And the primary, also, I mentioned this Thursday talks, but also Baba would give talks to the mandali at other days of the week at various places at Lower Mehrabad. So maybe 50% were at Kaka Shahane's or something like that. And these were really, the spiritual training of the mandali was in full progress at that time. And it seems that Baba was giving them their spiritual education, that is to say, the intellectual or the gyan or the understanding aspect of their spiritual education. I mean, a lot of it obviously consisted in the work they had to do, and the whole life with Baba was an education in itself. But in these talks, Baba was, it seems, creating the foundation in understanding for them that they were going to need in the upcoming years and decades of their discipleship. And a lot of the mandali who were there at the time were among his very core disciples. Some of them, drifted off but a lot of them stayed right through to the end. So you've got people like Gustaji or Padri or Pendu or Vishnu, Ramju, Dr. Ghani, Masaji, Chanji, and others who are like really, I mean, his inner circle, I mean, we don't know who his 12 inner circle members were, but surely a bunch of them were a part of this group. And this is where they got a lot of their education, really, on spiritual matters. So I think that these talks are very significant. They're not difficult. They're quite readable. And I don't know if any... Rosie got in 40 pages in. Is anyone else ahead of Rosie in the race to the end?
Cellophane removed.
Cellophane removed. Okay. That's like the starting gun has gone off for Lois. Yeah.
What date was one of those?
What's that?
What date was Mr. David? One of those?
Yeah, Baijul was there. He was one of them. Kaka Barya wasn't there yet, but Baijul was. Yeah. So, Pendu was there, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so these were, so we don't actually have a description of one of these occasions, but surely it must have been something like this. Baba would be, I don't know if he sat on a stool, probably sat on a stool, or maybe on the floor, on the cow dung flooring, in one of the Mehrabad places, or else at Kaka's place, and all the men would be gathered around him. The men and the women were completely separate by this time. In the last time that the men saw Mera and the women was on Baba's birthday in 1926, which was a huge event. 50,000 people came, they say. Can you imagine that? 50,000 people in those days. And after that, Mera and the other women were living in their own world and never saw the men again, really. I mean, there might have been a few exceptions, but basically that was it. And so you may have read a lot of their stories, of their, dealings with Baba through this whole period. We have books about Mera and so forth. It was a separate universe. So this was the men's sphere that these Tiffin Lectures are about. And Baba was talking about all kinds of different topics. So why don't we resume and just look? I'm just taking some little samples from the book. So as you know, feel free to chime in. If any of you happen to have been there and remember something, please inform the rest of us what was said by Baba on that time. Here's, I won't go here, I'll go somewhere else. Here's an illustration of the kind of drama that was going on over this time. In fact, it always, when I read about it from the combined diaries and other sources, it makes me think that living with Baba was like living on the lip of a volcano that had a habit of erupting every 3 or 4 days. It's like somebody would displease Baba in some way, and he would explode, and if you can't obey me better than this, go, I'm going to close the ashram. He would close the ashram. And, you get the impression that when Baba was displeased, it was like no joke at all. I mean, it was the awesomeness of God in human form. And people it wasn't, fear in the ordinary sense. His displeasure was absolutely overwhelming. And then something would happen and the mood would change, and it would be the most glorious mood in the whole world, So it was like very, very, very intense for them all. Meanwhile, all these activities were going on. There was a school for Erangel kids, and there was a dispensary and a leper asylum, and pilgrims were flooding in, and Baba was keeping all this stuff going at the same time. And Baba, of course, had his own dealings with the women who were part of the picture, though the men had nothing to do with that. So the dynamism and the level of activity is almost, it's hard to imagine. Every second something was happening. So that's the context out of which these came. And this comes at a particular moment, an interesting moment. In fact, why don't I read this? On Thursday of this week, Baba dropped a bombshell. The Mehrabad ashram was to be closed. He had just started it, like a year before. The school, dispensary, hospital, Upasani Sarai, that's the name of the Dharamshala. A Dharamshala is a hostel for pilgrims. They would come and spend the night there and have some food and have Baba's darshan. And other institutions, excepting the Makan, were to be closed and dismantled before the 1st of November. Now, I was saying yesterday, you may recall, those of you who are here, they had just built a lot of these places. Just in the previous year, the Sai Darbar was, I don't know, maybe as big as this room, higher roof, a meeting hall, and all the stuff, they had just put it up. And it's not like they had much money, but Baba just had it all torn down. And, what to say, these are young men who should have been starting up their careers from, respectable middle-class Zoroastrian, Muslim, Hindu families. They ought to have been getting married and living in Pune, certainly not in Erangown, the armpit of Maharashtra, begging pardon, but we're talking about a really wretched village where no one would go for career advancement, and there they were living there. And Baba had started up all these institutions, and within a year he closed them. Did you see them? So it looked like Meher Baba was a flake. He couldn't keep it going for more than a year or two. That's how it would look to the community at large, which was already intensely hostile to him. The Zoroastrians were tearing him to pieces, and a lot of them were tearing Maharaj to pieces too. So it was like the kind of action that would really discredit Baba in the eyes of much of the community. And these poor guys were already doing a tough enough thing by living with this man, and now he had just, suddenly, erratically, it would seem, closed all these institutions, which we're talking about right here. So if you can get an idea of what the scene was like, right? It's not like they were getting support from anywhere. Baba and a few selected members were to go to Persia and stay there till February, when Rustam, Adi, Dr., that would be Dr. Ghani, Adi Kirani, later Baba's secretary, Rustam, Adi's older brother, Ramju and others will join them and then decide for a new future program. Most of the next month was spent preparing for this traumatic transition, which wound up bringing Baba's first long stay to a close. The first long stay is from January 1925 until November 1926. This Tiffin lecture, given by Baba 2 days after the announcement, seems to incorporate some of Baba's response to the mental turbulence caused by these new developments. So most of the Tiffin lectures will begin with a little blurb like this, situating it in context. And then we have Baba here is talking about the voice of conscience at the beginning of it. Your mind must be as firm as a rock that resists strong blasts of wind from all sides without budging an inch. So this saying alludes to the weakness of mind that people exhibit when they do things half-heartedly just for show before the eyes of the world in general, etc. For instance, suppose your mind and conscience honestly admit and tell you that offering complete surrender to a Sadguru will do you good. In that case, do it. Surrender to him, heart and soul, even if the voice of the whole world tells you otherwise, even if the whole world opposes you. Do not do it merely to please him. Don't do it even just to please the Sadguru, he's saying. Nor out of fear of incurring his displeasure, nor to please and make a good show before other members of the Mandali. In just the same way, if your head and heart refuse to admit the existence of any such power in him, the Guru, if they distinctly tell you not to bow down before him, then don't do it, even at the risk, again, of provoking his displeasure. For the true Guru would, on the contrary, be pleased with such an honest, open, bold action on your part, preferring it to the false show of submission and surrender. Right? So Baba's saying, follow your conscience, whatever it tells you. And don't, here he's even saying, if you don't accept me, Baba's saying it, don't bow down to me if you don't really believe it. And then he goes on, in fact, I'll read a little more. There are many who seek Sadguru's darshan and visit him, yet at the same time are afraid of the world's disapproval and mockery at their stooping and bowing down before that sage's feet. It gives you a little idea of what the scene was. Baba would have a darshan, and I can imagine sort of going and wanting to bow down before him, but afraid, oh God, John Page is going to see and tell my family, and my name will be mud. You went to that Zoroastrian quack? Are you kidding me? There were really intense volatilities were there at the time. They do it nonetheless. Okay, and then Baba went on to explain about his work. That, as to this whole concern at Mehrabad, the world will speak on and on about the abrupt termination of these charitable institutions. They will say that it was no good of Shri to have made an end to them so precipitously, leaving all these poor and destitute and dependent people helpless and without recourse. Right? That's exactly what they must have been saying all over the place. But the people of the world who talk in this way have no idea why I did all of this on such a vast scale, and then so unceremoniously shut it all down again. So and he's explaining, for a Sadguru, the real work that he was doing was invisible, or it was not the work that appeared before the eyes of the world at all. And he had done it. He was finished. As you are all well aware, these institutions were of no value to me personally. I only used them as a means of bringing about spiritual advancement and giving a push to a certain number of men, that is, members of my circle, who deserved and were well prepared for it. My object and purpose fulfilled, I closed them all down. So it's like they were getting the education from Baba that when you're working for a Sadguru, it's a completely different ballgame than working for the world, And if you don't like it, go. That was the program. So these guys really got, the real thing. You know what this reminds me of a little bit is this episode. I mentioned yesterday that part of the excuse Baba used for closing down the ashram was that a couple of the Mandali had been a little bit unenthusiastic in their obedience. Right. So the proper response is to close down the ashram, right? Like that. And, being unenthusiastic, if you know what it was like to try to obey Baba, he would just find fault with you no matter what you did. You would kill yourself to do something, and he'd find some little, what's this? You do work this way? You don't care for me? Your love is like this? And at a certain point, Baba would ask you to do something, and, okay, Baba, sort of like, and then, what's this? You don't have any more enthusiasm than that? So on this sort of pretext, then he would close down the whole ashram. Now, I think they all knew that there were really other purposes going on. But to outsiders, it would look like Baba was just a lunatic. This crazy man, of course you understand I don't believe this at all, right? But how the world would have seen it. And these poor guys were getting the training of learning to stick with Baba no matter what the world said. So they were right in the thick of such an episode right then. And it makes me think of, since we're right here in the site of this similar crime committed by Baba, the Hollywood Bowl shtick in 1932, where, Baba had been so beautiful and magnetic, and it looked like the Christ, and, won everybody over, and came to Hollywood, and all the glitterati were fawning all over him. And then he does this Hollywood Bowl shtick where he's going to break his silence over international radio connections and everything, and then he cancels it, And it was utterly humiliating to some of his West. I think Gene Adriel writes about that in Avatar, about how all their friends were like mocking them. What are you doing following this man? And Baba would do this. He would shake, you get all this wonderful love and encouragement. And I'm sure that until that time here in Hollywood and in the West, you could say, yeah, that's Meher Baba. I'm with him, sort of like, oh, you're with him? Oh, how lucky you are. But after the Hollywood Bowl, you're with him? What kind of a fool, what kind of a sucker are you? So Baba would put his close ones got put through all of this to make them stick. And this is such an episode here. So you're getting a little bit of what he told them at that time. There one moment, the world, you're raised high in the sky before the world and everybody praises you. And the next moment, you're dragged through the dust and the world shits on you. And the real master puts you through these things. In fact, it was a little before this, but 1924, and I mentioned yesterday the Combined Diary is one of the sources from about this period, and Baba, with a few of his mandali, was traveling down to South India and up to North India, and it turned out to be a real torture trail. I mean, traveling with Baba was really hard for the mandali. I mean, sometimes brutally hard. And on top of everything else, Baba was saying, I'm looking for swamis and yogis and sadhus who will kick me and spit on me and, vomit all over me because I have nothing. I'm a phony. Maybe they'll improve me by doing this. And in fact, Maharaj, he's got nothing either. Hazrat Babajan, she's empty suit. All of these, we're all just phonies. And maybe if these swamis will abuse me and spit on me, maybe that will bring about some improvement in me. That's exactly what his friends and neighbors were all saying, right? In fact, the Mandali's not parents always, but the whole community was saying exactly this. And Baba was saying it. How did they stick? How did they stick? But actually, it says they came out more strongly convinced about him than ever before. So, I mean, can you imagine when you're already getting tested from all your neighbors and now Baba too is talking this way? So you have to be, I think, close mandali to get this from him. His ordinary followers wouldn't be subjected to this kind of thing, but his close mandali would. And in this period, you get to see it. I'm sure this is always available to real lovers of God. So if you're being spat upon and kicked, there's never a shortage. And some of the very best suppliers in this regard are other Baba. If the world isn't kicking you, other Baba lovers may jump in and fill the gap from time to time. Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, a lot of you will remember having met some of these guys, the Adi and Padre and those people, and they didn't complain about those times. To the contrary, they remembered it as a wonderful time with Baba, because this is how Baba made them Iron Men. I mean, they really were. They may have seen, they were loving and kind and all these sorts of qualities, but these were iron men. You could not shake them where Baba was concerned. Wouldn't you agree with that, as you met him? I mean, they were unbreakable. And this is how he did it. This was part of the process. He put them through it. And this was the time, the Tiffin Lectures, when they were his main focus, or part of his main focus. Once these dratted Meher ashram boys came on the scene the next year, the Mandali had to look after themselves, you know. He was all for them. And then when the Westerners were there, Baba was lavishing on the Westerners, and the poor Mandali were these, like, Indian servants who were, you know, getting kicked. So they didn't get his special focus again. They had already gotten it. This is when they got it. Right in this period. They had gotten it also in the Manzali Neem, too. This was the end of it, this period. Here's, just jumping to other topics, here's a little bit of information Baba gave about falling from the fourth plane. In case any of you are planning to do that, fall from the fourth plane, this will give you a little more of a description about what's in prospect. Let's see. This is kind of interesting. Let me see. In fact, it may begin here. Let me see. Yeah, so remember that this is before, I mean, the discourses were not published yet, 1926, and God Speaks wasn't there. So they were actually getting these explanations. Baba had probably explained to them some of this stuff before, but this would be how they learned about these things, from talks like this. Okay, so on the fourth plane, just as one experiences untold pleasure, so one incurs pain as penalty for the enjoyment of this pleasure, etc. This plane is the repository of many great powers that can be acquired by means of the yogas. Powers great, zabardast, to the extent that even allowing the one who possesses them to revive the dead, so great as to move mountains. Yet this experience of the planes with their great powers and paraphernalia, all of this is no more than a dream which the spirit sees in the subtle sphere. And as soon as the desire to make miracles takes gross form, that is, gets put into action, the spirit of the yogi in the subtle planes, is forced to assume the gross form, which happens the moment it leaves its samadhi state and gives up its gross body, i.e. dies. The gross form that the yogi assumes pulls him down from his exalted station all the way down to the lowest state of stone. Such grave risks one incurs on the fourth plane. And he says a little bit more about this. How the Sadguru takes you where you don't even see these things. Just as explained in this, let's see, the subtle form of the spirit that has attained to the yoga state. Baba would use the word yoga in these days to refer to the planes. A yogi was someone on the lower planes. In later years, there was a stock market crash, and the yogis became, there's not such an honorific term, but in these days he meant someone on the first lower planes of consciousness. There arise temptations which expose the spirit to the chance and hazard of falling catastrophically into the grip and binding of samskaras. This happens when the subtle desire to perform miracles is put into gross action. And once that spirit gets enmeshed in the binding of these samskaras, it is compelled to descend to their lowest stage and degree. So this is a little explanation of why it happens. For all the refuse of past samskaras created during the spirit's progress from the lowest stone form, and there was a figure a few pages earlier showing all of this, to its present much higher yogi state, garbage that had accumulated and blocked its path and advancement had been removed by the spirit through the varied means of yoga samadhi. So you're in a state of yoga samadhi in the fourth plane, and all this crap has been moved aside for the time being. As a result, the way through which the spirit had advanced all this time, once clogged with the accumulated refuse of samskaras, is now in the yogi state quite clear of obstruction. And so when the spirit subjects itself once again to the binding and places itself under the weight and garbage of all these samskaras, it is brought down precipitously to the lowest level of these samskaras. For the weight of these samskaras is tremendous. You follow that idea? You have all your samskaras from your evolutionary past, your 8,400,000 species in evolution, and millions of lifetimes in human form. All those samskaras have been moved aside for the time being. But when you misuse your powers and when you drop your body, they all come crashing back down on you and you're crushed. So that's why it happens. It's the weight of your own samskaras crushes you. Yeah. He did give, there's another Tiffin lecture, I won't go to it, but he talked about a perfect master by the name of Akalkot Swami. Akalkot Swami. Have you ever heard of Akalkot Swami? If you go to India, there are lots of posters of him, if you get to recognize him. He's quite, you know how there are all these posters of Lakshmi and Vishnu and Sai Baba, and these very nice, I like them myself, these posters they put up all over the place. And a lot of them are him. He was a 19th century perfect master down in Akalkot, which is on the edge of what's the state right to the south of Maharashtra? I'm forgetting at the moment. But he had contact with Sai Baba of Sharity. He was one of the people who helped Sai Baba return to ordinary consciousness. He was Jalali, a very fiery, perfect master. And there was someone in his, came to see him, a yogi. And Baba said this yogi was on the fourth plane and had been using his powers. And of course, the others in taking Akalkot Swami's darshan wouldn't have known this, but Akalkot Swami did. And he started abusing the guy, calling him, he used the term randibazi, which is, you whoremongerer. And everybody thought that he was, visiting prostitutes or something like that. But what he meant was that he was misusing his powers. And Akalkot Swami got so angry that he gave him a big, huge slap. And get this, knocked him up to the seventh plane. So where is justice in this world?
I tell you, where is...
He should have been a stone. So there's another story about that. Baba did say once that if you're misusing your powers on the fourth plane, if the presiding perfect master is of the Jamali type, do you know Jamali? Mild and gentle and merciful, he'll snatch away your powers and save you. And if he's of the Jalali type, the fiery, glorious, majestic type, he'll knock you down to stone state. And in this case, seventh plane. The guy should have been a stone, If you get knocked down to stone state, file a lawsuit and cite it. You get the Tiffin Lectures. Larry can help you write the note, the legal note. I don't really know, but I have an impression, maybe it's from Maharaj's discourses. Did you ever run across this, Bob? That there are warnings given to people on the path. I have that impression, that they do get warned.
Father mentioned that then he was going through that
Yeah.
place. He remembered. All
Yeah.
the warning, that's why we didn't do it.
I don't know this to be so, but I do have the impression that the hierarchy arranges to give people warnings. But of course, that's no guarantee they're going to listen, you know. But I don't actually know that. Anybody here in the fourth plane can inform us on this? So this is an interesting, okay, so I'll read the miracles. Besides this, there is another reason for the fall to stone. Miracles are illusions within illusion. Bas no bi bas. Bas means illusion. And the cause of illusions is samskaras, which means, in short, that the spirit in the fourth plane, while performing miracles, gets gripped around the throat, is a nice Marathi phrase. I think gardan is the word. By these samskaras, so sharply and severely that it is actually crushed under their unexpectedly extraordinary weight. Isn't this interesting? It gives you an impression of what the experience would be. All of you drop your body first, and then you're actually crushed by your own samskaras. When it comes into the clutch of these samskaras, after some interval of yoga samadhi, it has to fall to the lowest station. This happens after the spirit gives up its gross body and dies. This same gross body, during this period of yoga samadhi, had all the while been utterly neglected, since the yogi was enjoying experiences of the planes and their paraphernalia through their subtle body. So you're having a joyride in your subtle body, but then after you come out of samadhi and when you drop your body, you're crushed. So this is a warning. This is the very first of all these Tiffin Lectures. Let's see. Here's Baba gave a whole bunch of talks, or a couple anyway, on rites, rituals, and ceremonies, and explaining them. Sorry, I have the wrong thing here. 64. Yeah, there was they had a visitor. Was it this lecture? Let's see. Yeah, he doesn't mention it. In the diary we find out who it is. They had a visitor from the Theosophical Society. There's a big Theosophical, actually it's up in Ojai, isn't it? A big Theosophical Society center. And Baba was speaking very critically of them. And one of the things that he didn't like about them was that they were trashing Vivekananda. Does anybody happen to know about that? Were they... You know Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was the disciple, one of the disciples of Ramakrishna, a very, very great soul. And Baba liked Vivekananda a lot. Of course, Ramakrishna was a perfect master. But Baba was very critical of these theosophists for going after Vivekananda.
Part they went after him because they wanted to uphold
Krishnamurti.
And even though Krishnamurti was saying, I'm not this guy.
Yeah.
And they're not this person chosen disciple.
Yeah. So a jealousy there or something like that. Yeah. So they had their own man. At this time, Krishnamurti had not yet repudiated their election, the Theosophical Society's election of him as the savior of the age. I think he did that maybe about 2 years after this. Good on him for having the honesty to acknowledge that. But in this, Baba, let's see, contained. So he really goes after a lot of the slavish ritualism. And Baba was kind of, what do you say, an equal opportunity critic of all the religions. He dealt it out to all of them. And more than anybody else, it seems like the religion he most criticized was Zoroastrianism. And I take that to be a kind of a courtesy. It's like when, it's your own religion and you trash it. It's sort of a bit more polite than trashing somebody else's religion. But he did trash trash is too severe. He was very critical of the mindless orthodoxy of it. But at the same time, he did explain that a lot of these rituals were indeed given by masters for the benefit of the world at large, in the understanding of what they needed then, and they have a mystical significance, but that had been completely forgotten about by followers at the time. Okay, so the Mohammedans maintain that realization can be obtained only within the Mohammedan religion. And towards this end, they bring forth silly arguments concerning the Shariat and Sunnah. Do you know what the Sunnah is? It's the conventional teachings of Islam, the orthodox way of Islam. And they seem to say Shariat in India. The Arabic form, which you hear in the news so much now, is Sharia. It's the same word. How ridiculous. Their great prophet Muhammad gave to the people and propagated to the world the divine doctrine of cutting the mind, maya, and sanskaras. That is, Muhammad enjoined them to keep the mind in check, which is forever wandering in worldly maya, to hold it aloof, safe, and away from maya's clutches, and to destroy the sanskaras as much as possible. Failing to grasp the deep meaning of this divine doctrine given to them by their prophet, certain fine philosophical heads invented and preached the cutting of the skin instead of the cutting of the mind. I guess this is circumcision I was talking about. And the people blindly accepted and followed this teaching as if it had been given to them by their own prophet. And now they lay particular stress and emphasis upon it. What an absurd reversal this is of the real and original doctrine which Muhammad had given to them. Then again, the Parsis generally say that the essence of religion all comes down to the meaning of the kasti, the sacred thread. You know the kasti, right? Do you know what the kasti is? Kushti, yeah. Okay. It's a thread that Zoroastrians wear. And it's made of 72 horsehairs, right?
No, sheep.
Sheep. Okay. And I think you're supposed to take it out and snap it, right?
And then you snap it means you are telling the devil to go on back and...
Right. So Baba then explains that the sacred thread, which they wrap around the waist and strike off, as it is called, as many times a day as possible. And then they go on to deride non-believers and Zoroastrians as Darvans, heathens, yeah. And the Christians have that nice word, heathen, and you know the Muslim word is kafir, right? So everybody's got it. So I don't know if we Baba lovers have got a term yet. We need to exercise our minds.
Alan Talbot, that's the word.
Alan Talbot? Yeah. See how they reduced the ideals of their great religion to showy display and fancy ceremonial gestures. In giving his order in connection with the Kashti, their great prophet intended that they should strike off the dust, accumulating every moment on their body and mind in the form of sanskaras. What the gesture signifies, in other words, is the striking off and destruction of sanskaras. But the high priests, the dasturs, and other scholars have misread and misrepresented this beautiful doctrine of their prophet. They misguided the people into believing that putting on the sadra and kashti and striking off the thread a given number of times daily would cut off and free them from the sins they had committed, whatever these were, and would reveal to them their way to salvation. Simple nonsense. The same applies to Christian philosophy, propounded by the so-called ministers of the present day, who preach that salvation can be won only through accepting the faith of Christ and baptism, and that all non-believers in Christianity are heathen, and so on. And then Baba, what is all this nonsense which is happening in the sacred name of religion? Shaking the beliefs of other people is, if not a sin, a weakness, indeed an expression of cowardice. What earthly benefit derives from increasing the number of people who believe in and adhere to a particular faith? Well, we're talking about the world, aren't we? Man, that's what everybody's into. Numbers. And from boasting before the world that one's religion has so many thousands or even lakhs of followers. Is the merit of a religion to be measured by counting the number of its believers and followers? And then Baba was always so realistic about this. He said, if you give to the teeming millions of India who are poor, needy, destitute, and illiterate some little inducement in the form of good food and clothing.
What page was that?
88, yeah. And money. At once they will agree to accept and embrace any creed. And they will immediately abandon that creed and accept another if someone else offers them a superior inducement. What's so great in that? Nothing at all. Therefore I say, win control of your mind. Lead a pure, clean, and virtuous life. Purge low desires, and follow one who has realized God, and you are saved. Following in this sense does not mean giving up your own creed or religion, but has to be given up as your own mind. So this is a nice talk on that subject, about how superficial all these religions are. In fact, here he goes on more about this. The Mohammedans believe that blowing off the heads of kafirs who play music before the mosques. There was that's been an issue in Islam about music, playing music, and
all of what happened.
huh?
I've seen all of what happened.
Yeah. I know there were all these debates up in Delhi about whether you could have musical instruments accompanying, some of the perfect masters were involved in all of this. And they had bans on poetry at certain times in Islam too. But blowing off the heads of kafirs who play music for the mosques is a sacred duty, sabab. Indeed, especially ordered by their religion. Acting on such silly notions and misguided beliefs, they proceed to attempt to strike off the heads of Hindus, who likewise led astray by fanaticism, try to blow off the heads of Mohammedans, Nastik Yavan, and thus many precious human lives are lost on both sides. Baba's point of view in all of this is, it's like, all of this is like ridiculous, He's not shaken by it, It's like the Lord of the universe is looking, look at these people, how idiotic they're being. And blowing off someone's head, it's not that Baba doesn't have compassion, but it's not the end of even that person. He'll just get reborn, So you have God's own point of view on all of this, who's not, shaken by it or anything like that. What is all this bloodshed in the sacred name of religion? What is true and real that ought to be done in the name of religion? Creating and fostering friendly feelings, showering kindness and help on human beings everywhere. All this is left aside and ignored, and precious lives are lost for no earthly reason or benefit. What a time we live in, this Kali Yuga. This is one of his references to the Kali. You know the Kali Yuga? Yeah, it's in the Hindu cosmology, there are 4 yugas, 4 ages. The Satya Yuga, what's the second yuga? And then Treta Yuga and Dwapara Yuga. The Treta Yuga and the Kali Yuga is the 4th, which is the age of real degeneration.
Where we are now,
Yeah, right in the thick of it. What a time we live in, this Kali Yuga. Such barbarous, brutal bloodshed for the sake of religion on the one hand, and on the other, this so-called avatar, that would be Krishnamurti, forced to play that role while prejudices run rampant around him. And these last remarks were, again, in reference to Krishnamurti, whom Annie Besant had been touting and trying to force upon her Theosophical Society as a vehicle of the new avatar, etc. So this is one of his, let me see. Yeah, he even says here, such is the turn and tendency. He's talking about how easy it is to get a big following. You just tell people what they want to hear and you'll get lots of followers in no time. They want religious doctrines and dogmas suited to their mindset, ideals and tastes in life. And any shrewd leader who observes and makes out the trend of their thinking, if he preaches accordingly, will succeed in collecting a huge following in no time, while genuine workers and sincere believers in truth and religion, in the real sense, will find it hard to impress their high ideals in the minds of their hearers and turn them in that direction. Such is the 20th century, with all its so-called civilization and daily advances and inventions in the realm of science. So that was a sample of the kind of rap Baba was giving them about rites, ritual ceremonies. One place he'll criticize he mentions people who will shout Tukaram, 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 and jumping around, and as they do so. And I wasn't aware of this, but he must have been to Tukaram's places are close to Ahmednagar, must have gone there and seen these followers of Tukaram. Tukaram was a perfect master and a great composer of abangs, a kind of a hymn, songs, devotional songs. Very, very great songs, and one of the celebrated figures of Maharashtrian spirituality. And you would think that Baba would have approved of the followers of Tukaram, but obviously he thought that their behavior was ridiculous. They must have been showing off and making a big show of their emotionalism and display how much they love Tukaram, and one more ecstatic than the last. And so Baba was really saying, this is absurd, this is a ridiculous kind of behavior. He also, at another Tiffin lecture, mentioned the prayers that the Muslims do, the salat, the 5 times a day, the prayer. And he said that all of these things were given, in that case by Muhammad, or Allah, according to the story of the Miraj that we read, that for the upliftment of mankind. So these rites, rituals, and ceremonies, many of them do have a divine source at their root. But the problem is, as we read yesterday in one of those talks, that people mistake the means for the end. They take the rite, ritual, and ceremony as the purpose of it all, when it is not. It is only meant to be the means for people to find God that way.